We got Brian Smith on the show. Let's talk about Ben Novak, the newest offensive line commit. Big picture thoughts on Purdue and Rutgers and what to look forward to with Northwestern coming up this weekend. All that and more. Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. Really do appreciate it. You can catch this every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And let's bring that man on. Let's bring on the bringer of truth, Brian Smith, who called a demolition of Purdue. And then Wisconsin also took care of Rutgers. I want to get big picture thoughts on what that means, beating two teams that they probably should be, but beating the pants off them. But first, I want to start with this. We haven't talked recruiting in a while because the Badgers haven't had a commitment in a while, quite frankly. Benjamin Novak, 6'6", all of 320 pounds, Maryville, Indiana, interior offensive lineman, 2026 guy, mid 3-star, commits to the Badgers. Watching Novak on film, what did you see?
Raw power. I know the high school program he's from. It's always had players. And it's in the Northwestern part of the state. The cold weather, the wind, all that kind of fits Wisconsin's program. So he's from the region, as they call it, in Indiana. But that's a kid that likes to lock on and throw guys to the ground. I want to see more technique and stuff as he gets older and you know, using his feet after contact. But like from the waist up, just the raw power, that is not normal for a human being to be that powerful at his age. You know, he's 26, so he's a junior. That's pretty impressive. The other thing I'm curious about, I didn't see, in this typical high school, I didn't see him a lot in pass pro, and I know he's an interior guy, but I'm curious about that. I need to see him at a camp setting against somebody that's got a chance to play college football to know that. But he's a run blocker. He's a interior mauler, kind of an old school Wisconsin Barry Alvarez guy, to be honest. He's the right guard for Barry's teams. That's why I would stick to the player.
Yeah, a lot of offensive linemen, high school offensive linemen you recruit are smaller. I mean, smaller in the sense that they're going to have to get to college and add weight, right? They're going to come in at 270 and add 30 pounds, come in at 280, add 30 pounds. This is a kid who is 320 in high school. He might be the inverse. He might get in that college strength and conditioning program, slim up a little bit and get a little more athletic and a little more mobile. And then you already know he can carry the weight.
That's the program that Georgia's gone with. They didn't sign a kid under, I think, 340 last year, 330. It's one of the weirdest things ever. They had like 6 kids, all like 330 and up. I mean, Georgia does things differently, but that's kind of the approach with this kid. And I wonder if they want to be a little more balanced in the kind of kids they take. They've taken some pretty good athletes in this class, the 25 class for O-line. They want to have a little variety, get a more of a power guy, just pure interior muscle. And I get it. Now the question is, can you surround him with a left tackle and a center? And you always want a left tackle and a center in pretty much every class if you can. If you can get those guys to go along with it, I'm down. But he's a long-term project in terms of getting ready because he's going to change his body, as you mentioned, Ryan. And you're also going to have to try to figure out, is he better at right or left? Could he possibly play center? Maybe. I don't know, but that's something to think about. But I believe he's a guard at the very least.
Yeah, last one here on Novak. When you're looking at a guy like that, and you mentioned the technique needs to get a little bit better, right? The footwork after point of contact needs to keep driving, needs to play a little bit lower. What else are you looking at technique-wise when you look at a guy like Novak who is a little raw?
Very few guys are going to run through him, and he should know that. When a guy makes a move and goes right or left, he needs to pivot better because guys are hitting the gap that are higher level players, even as powerfully as he is. And again, this is a very strong young man. He's going to lose that battle, and he's going to get a bazillion holding calls at the next level. A great example is Maui Noah, the right tackle at the University of Miami. He's a future 10-year NFL player, no question. But he's so unbelievably strong, he sometimes stops his feet and just tries to long arm a guy. Well, in college, that doesn't work, and the flag comes out. You start grabbing. That's something that is always predicated when you stop your feet on contact. Coaches will go bananas in practice. With offensive alignment, it's more often than not, that's what it is. Don't sit there and just try to wrestle him. You got to drive. You got to keep your hands inside and drive. That never changes. From 7th grade all the way up, it's the same basic thing. Even, in pass pro, once you lock on, you want to drive the guy. he's got to do a better job with that. And when the angles take, he doesn't always move right to left very well.
Let me ask you this big picture. How much does bad technique freak you out as a talent evaluator? Because, and I want to pivot to another prospect that I know you've seen a lot of. There are players that come from good high schools that have good high school coaches who have poor technique. And that's always a bit of a red flag to me, where if you play several years and you don't seem to get better. For an offensive lineman, maybe from another place, is technique a big red flag for you? Or if you trust the offensive line coach at a place like Wisconsin, who is A.J. Blazek, who has been really good, is it kind of a non-factor because you just trust a program to coach that out of them?
O-line's one of the hardest to figure that out. It might be the hardest because every scheme's a little different. But at the same time, you would like to see at least one thing they do, whatever it is, to have some natural technique. Playing too high and stopping their feet are the two things almost every kid does. This is nothing different with Novak. But I'm not as worried about it with O-line because there are hardly any guys that come out of high school with good technique, because O-line is a lifelong learning skill. There is things like Tyron Smith, guys like that would, played forever for like Dallas. It's still, think about how many guys have went to the NFL from Wisconsin and were gone quick. Mm-hmm. The slightest thing that you're not good at, man, somebody will find it. They will run that back on tape, and every team in the league's got it. Same thing at the college level. It is hard. So I look at it like fit is probably the biggest thing. Did you pick a school that fit your skill set? And I know Wisconsin's got a good O-line coach, but they went to more of an air raid style of offense with some power running mixed in. It's kind of a unique blend, honestly. I'm curious to see how they teach a guy like Novak, because he's totally different than the guys they got in the 25 class. I don't know how to grade him for Wisconsin because I try to look at the school. I don't know what they're going to do with him yet. I'm going to hold judgment on that. But it can be in general. Does the guy fit? I don't know if they're going to go to a bigger, more powerful line moving forward, because he doesn't fit what they did in 25.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let me pivot really quick, and I'm going to ask you this because I saw you tweet about him the other day. Wilnerson Telemock, the defensive end out of Florida. He was a guy who, when I watched earlier film of him, felt like the physical tools were there, but he kind of stood up. He didn't have great leverage. There was some technique stuff going on at times. What does he look like this year? What have you seen from him kind of jumping from last year to this year?
Much better power in his hips. First step explosion, beating the lineman to the punch, literally. Like, you want to punch, you want to get right in the middle of the chest plate if you can. It's hard. But if you can get that, you can do whatever. One of the first clips on that tape, the other team's backed up as it is, and he literally walks back the O-lineman with one arm. I don't care if it's a bad play or not. That's hard. So his strength has improved. He's in much better shape. His flexibility's improved. I know Wilnerson pretty well, and he's a kid that just wants to prove it. He's got kind of a chip on his shoulder because he didn't think he got recruited by the local schools the way he should have. Fair enough. And he's taken it upon himself to go on a mission. And he's been on that mission for a little over a year. Like, he looks totally different from the waist up, how he walks, everything. I think that's a kid that his stock is going up, and he's earned it. He's done it the old-fashioned way with hard work. So now my question is, where does he play in college? I've always wondered if he was going to end up as a D tackle, but he's about 6'6". He's a big dude. So he's 260-ish, I would guess, 250. I'm not sure exactly, but can he play 3 tech at least part-time in the Big Ten, which is always, especially this part of the year, on more of a running league? Playing against Iowa, ask Washington, it's not fun. Okay. Wisconsin fans don't like Iowa, but I'm sure they respect their O-line. Yeah. Can you battle play after play when you know what's coming? It's inside zone and outside zone. This is not going to be complex. Can you handle that as an interior guy? Because then he becomes more and more valuable. I know he can play strong side end because that's kind of what his body's built for now. But how much more weight could he put on and sustain it and be at least a part-time interior guy? That would be very big for the Badgers.
No, great stuff as always for Braedyn on the recruiting trail. We're going to take a quick break there. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about big picture thoughts after Purdue and Rutgers, 2 back-to-back dominant performances by the Badgers and Braedyn Locke. We're going to talk about that with Brian Smith next on Locked On Badgers. We're going to jump back into this show in 1 second, but first a quick break for our incredible friends of the show over at Game Time. And check out this scenario, right? You're having a first date. It's going incredible. You've planned it out to the T. You nailed dinner. conversation, you are crushing it. You're up on political events and current news, and you're funny and you're quippy, you're well-dressed. And the coup de grace to all of this is this incredible event, this concert, this sporting event, monster truck rally, whatever it is. And at the last minute, your tickets fall through. You're a guy who was supposed to hook you up with this. He fell through. What are you going to do? I got you. No worries. Save the date. Head over to Game Time right now. Find the tickets to the best event, the biggest event, whatever it is, over on Game Time. The biggest inventory, flash deals, the best prices, whatever you need from an entertainment standpoint is available on Game Time. It's fast, easy, incredible. Snag the tickets without the stress over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Save the date, save the moment. Go get Game Time. All right, let's jump back into our great show here. All right, so prior to the Purdue game, you were very confident in the Badgers, not just winning, but winning comfortably. And I think they even exceeded that, dropping a 40-plus burger. Then they beat Rutgers. They beat really the pants off Rutgers, going on the road, beating a pretty good Rutgers team, at least up to this point, a solid Rutgers team. Big picture, what do you take out of two back-to-back dominant games from the Badgers?
Two things that I didn't think I would see this quickly. First, let's start with the quarterback. Locke's a little more confident than I thought he would be at this juncture. And quite honestly, he's got some moxie. He's, I don't want to say a pure gunslinger, but if I remember right, he's second all time in the state of Texas in passing yards or something like that.
First in touchdowns in 6A, actually. Yeah.
You have to have some guts to throw some of those passes. They took it to those teams. They threw it in the corners. They would throw short on screens. He's leading guys. Wisconsin's got more talent, as I noted recently on your show, at receiver than what I thought, at least the starters. Like Anthony's a guy, you know what I mean? They got some, Will Pauling's a guy. I know he's banged up, but whatever. They got some players. If you lead them, they can make plays after the catch. And that's what separates most of the teams offensively in the Big Ten at the top and not. But they got skill guys like Michigan's running backs the last couple of years. You screwed up at all, they were gone. Ohio State's receivers, etc. There's something about that. When was the last time we said that about Wisconsin's wide receivers? I don't know. I don't think I ever have.
No, it's been a minute. Yeah, it's been a minute.
They've improved a lot. I think that's first thing. And then secondly, I am shocked that they were able to all but stonewall, especially to the first half. Like it was just repulsive how bad Rutgers' offensive line was against Wisconsin's front. So credit to the Wisconsin defense. We knew eventually with that staff at Pickle, this would start to take shape. It's a little quicker than I thought, especially being in the middle of the season on, you get some banged up guys. They did a nice job with the fits. They outcoached them up front, timed some blitzes. They're into it now. Like they've got their mental game ready to go. They know which guys to blitz, which team. This is very similar to how they ran it at Cincinnati. They take those timely blitzes and make things happen. I'm like, okay, that means you also have a little more comfort, at least. I know it's Rutgers. They're not throwing the ball all over the place, but a little more comfort with the ability to play some man or some tight coverage, bring your safety down. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that against a few other teams on the schedule. This next week won't be a problem probably, but that's the next step. If you can stuff the run, you always have a chance. You always have a chance. And they look good to me, man. I'm impressed. I think the strength and conditioning programs also helped out because those guys up front aren't as beat up as some other teams around the country.
Yeah, I think the Badgers are a little deeper than people give them credit for, too. They're staying fresh into the second half of games. I do want to ask you this, because nationally, the discussion around you beat a Purdue team, you beat the pants off them, it's kind of, well, it's Purdue, it doesn't really matter. Well, that Purdue team, yes, but also that Purdue team, Nebraska kind of struggled to put them away. Like they beat Rutgers by a lot. Nebraska struggled to put Rutgers away, right? Like you start to look around at other teams playing these schools, and people aren't beating Rutgers 40-6 or whatever. People aren't even Purdue last week against Illinois. That was a gunfight to the end. You know, I don't know if you get as much credit as you deserve for dominant performances against teams you should be dominant against.
That's a trait that drives me nuts, because here's the other side of it. Fans usually take the negative side in this. If Wisconsin beats Rutgers 20-13, your Twitter handle would be lit up with inboxes and everything else. You can't have it both ways. Mm-hmm. They kicked the bejesus out of them. Go celebrate that you kicked the bejesus out of them.
Thank you. Yes.
It's just, like, I'm not exactly the most positive, happy-go-lucky guy, obviously. But I even said that I was watching. I turned off the Wisconsin game. I'm like, they can't run the ball against them. And Wisconsin stuffing their run. This game is over. And then they were also hitting a few nice plays in the passing game to mix it in. I'm like, this is going to get completely out of hand. And it was by really the middle of the second quarter. By that point, Rutgers, I mean, you could just tell their body language. They were done. Coaching staff knew they didn't have a quarterback that could get, they can't throw the ball. If you stuff their run, they're in a lot of trouble. So I think Wisconsin's kind of onto something here. They're a little better than I thought. And they've also just improved the last couple of weeks. They've finally taken that jump. It happens in year two sometimes. Maybe they end up winning 6 or 7 games and go into a bowl. I didn't think they were going to go to a bowl when I first watched some of the film a few weeks ago. I really didn't. They have improved immensely in that time. That's a good sign. Let me ask you this final one on this before we shift to kind of Northwestern coming up, bigger picture. We had talked a couple weeks ago about what do they do at quarterback next year, right? You're going to have to go into the portal again. Maybe TVD's hurt. The backup's maybe your mentor. He's a true freshman. Braedyn Locke, if he continues to play well, and he has to finish this year out on a solid note, but could he just be that quarterback next year? Could he be the guy for Wisconsin? There's 2 ways I look at that. My biggest concern with him is the same reason that he didn't end up at Texas A&M, or Oklahoma. We all know what it is, size. Can he finish the year healthy? And if he can do that, that's good. But there's a caveat with it. For this offense to truly hit the measurements that it needs to hit, the offense coordinator, when he was at Carolina, his last 2 quarterbacks, although NFL players, what'd they do? They ran a lot. I think they were scared to death to run Locke, because if he gets hurt, got a freshman in. You still got to see what he can do. It's a lose-lose. There's just no way around it. You have to see it in live action. Is he smart enough to get down? Because if he's not your guy next year, because he's going to get his head killed this year. But then you got to go to the portal. The other side of that is, even if he does look like the next guy that's going to be in Wisconsin for 2-3 years to start, and that's great, are you sure about your backup? Because it's a true freshman, and we don't get to see him in practice. And this is one of the things I say in my Locked On Seminole show all the time. Coaches lie about a lot of things. Injuries, they nonstop lie. The other thing is the backups are always great. Why? They want those kids to hear it, the parents to hear it, because they don't want them to transfer. So it's a real tough situation. There's going to be a transfer portal window coming up. I think it starts the 9th of December. They've got to find a way to get a backup at the very least, just to add to the roster. That's a really hard thing to do, because you're talking about taking a guy that's probably not going to play much, if at all. Does it tick off the younger guy? You can't just have 2 quarterbacks, you know, and then add like a redshirt freshman or freshman can't be your 2 backups. I know what that's like covering Florida State. How's that working out for the Noles right now? Okay. It's a terrible plan. You need a junior or senior as your backup quarterback. I know the younger guys don't want to hear that, but if you don't, and Locke gets hurt in game 2 next year, how's that going to go for Wisconsin? So there's no good answer at quarterback, because about 60% of QBs transfer in their career. It's been that way for 30, 40 years. It's not going to change now. But I would take somebody, even if it's a backup, because young quarterbacks usually suck. I don't care if they're a 5-star. Like, even Arch didn't come in and play right away at Texas. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really hard position. So I hope they take one, even if it's a backup. Yeah, that makes sense. Bill Walsh, the great Bill Walsh, used to say, I try to draft a quarterback every year. Now, it didn't always happen, but he always wanted to add to the room, right? Whether it's a 6th rounder or 7th or whatever, just keep adding to that room, because it's the most important position in football. But you're right, like threading that needle of finding a guy who's willing to come in to probably be a backup without ticking off the freshman, without, like, that is a really tough need, because you can't just go get a guy, because if you just get some jag, it doesn't matter, right? You need a dude who could actually come in and play as the number 2, but a guy who's not necessarily thinking he's going to come in and play as the 1. That's a crazy thread to needle there. The only other thing I'll add is they might take a guy that's a little more mobile. Maybe it could be a package guy too, even if that's not his first desire. Somebody that's 6'2", 205, then when he turns the corner, you always think about trying to hit him high, because that's not a fun guy to tackle. And if it's a 6'3", 225 guy, all the better. But Wisconsin does need a backup quarterback more than likely, because, again, I don't get to see the freshman or whatever, but not many coaches are going to want to rely on that. And if you're to him, the next guy's a true freshman. Like, having two experienced quarterbacks on your depth chart is so important.
All right, we're going to take one quick break for our great friends of the show, and then we're going to jump back into this conversation. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our incredible friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is awesome. Right now, NFL fans, if you bet $5, you get $200 bonus bets back guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com is incredible. The official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, the biggest sportsbook out there. They are amazing and awesome. And you know that feeling when you hit a home run bet, that 3-team parlay, that 4-team parlay, maybe it's a 5-teamer, and you're sealing the deal with Tyree Walker, reaching over the end zone as you're screaming in the stands, seeing the dollar signs raining from the sky. I mean, I don't know that feeling because I don't ever hit parlays, but I'm sure there's people out there that do. And if you're going to hit those parlays, head over to FanDuel.com to do it again. A $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Spice up your weekend. Do it responsibly as always, but it is the best platform. Parlays, teasers, future spreads. If you were betting on the Badgers, this is the place you have to do it. Again, do it responsibly, but spice up your weekend with the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. That's over at FanDuel.com. All right, let's jump back into this show. Yeah, that's a great point. All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk Northwestern. Coming up, Wisconsin's going to go on the road, although it's kind of one of those wonky road games because Northwestern's in that little temporary stadium this year on the banks of the Great Lake, Lake Michigan. But why is this game challenging for the Badgers? They have Penn State coming up next weekend. So this is a potential trap opportunity where you're coming off two really good games. You have Penn State, which is going to be a night game, coming up in 2 weeks. You have to now go to Northwestern. To me, this game is incredibly important because if you drop this, you've lost all this momentum you built, and then you have to go play Penn State. If you can win this one, you're 5-2 with mojo heading into a home night game against Penn State.
This game is the trap game of all trap games. And I know they struggle with Northwestern like most teams do because they're so well coached on defense. They don't give up many big plays. I think they're like 10th in the nation rush defense. They suck pass defense, and this is probably going to shock people. I've definitely never said this on the Wisconsin podcast. I can tell you that. I think they're going to light up Wisconsin through the air. The caveat there is it is literally that stadium, for those you haven't seen, on the lake. If it's windy, and it's almost always windy this time of year, I've got family in that area. That's the part I'm curious about. You have to adjust your game plan from series to series. It can be calm for 10 minutes and then 25-mile-an-hour gusts. I can't imagine playing for the Bears or Northwestern as a quarter. It'd be horrible. Mm-hmm. If I was a free agent NFL guy, I would never want to play the Bears if I was quarterback. It's just not a good place to play. But if they can hit some plays early in the game and make Northwestern try to run the ball a little less, because they want to kind of poke and prod and just go down the field slow. They're not a speed demon team throwing a bunch of slants and the sluggos and bombs. They're trying to get you with 5 yards of play. And their quarterback's a mobile guy. You and I talked about it. He's about 4 to 5 yards of carry when it's just a true run. Take away the sack average, or the sacks against his average. He's a pretty good runner, but he's not going to kill you. If Wisconsin's defense continues like they have up front the last few weeks, stuffing the run, I think Northwestern's in a lot of trouble. Because he's not a guy that's going to kill it. You mentioned like the last couple of games, not the highest percentage against decent competition. Lausch or whatever his name is. He's just okay. Good athlete. Mm-hmm. But I think Wisconsin can stuff them. I think, I don't want to say it's going to be as bad as Rutgers. Northwestern's better than Rutgers. No question. But they could be up 10, 14 points at half. Do you really think a team with a running quarterback first is going to make a big comeback against Wisconsin unless they help them with a pick six or something? I do not.
Yeah.
So this is a game where you should get out ahead and you should win by double digits. I know it's on the road, but what they do doesn't fit against Wisconsin's defense. Good luck.
Well, and barring what we both talked about, what you mentioned, barring some type of letdown, overlook sandwich where you're just looking at Penn State, which does happen in college. Fans never want to hear that. Fans never want to hear that.
Oh, it's a real thing, brother.
A very real thing, right?
You could tell a player, if he's not ready for this game, you're going to take his hand off. He would lose his hand every week. You cannot convince 20-year-olds that they're not just going to go out and roll the ball out. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is. That age group has the attention span of a dead gnat. So it's hard, man. And you can't tell me that walking around campus in Madison, there aren't people already talking to them about the Penn State game. Zero chance that's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
And they want a piece of a top 5 team. So I assume that you'll be there and a whole bunch of other crazy people will be there, probably not very sober, trying to get that game to be lit. So, by the way, Penn State threw for like 400 yards against USC. So that'll be a much different offensive game plan or defensive game plan when you get to that one. But this week, stuff the run, make a few timely throws, and don't turn it over. You should win by double digits against Northwestern.
Well, let's really quickly, and I'm sure, or at least I'm hopeful, and I will be there to watch the Badgers play the Nittany Lions. I will not be sober. I will be helping get that crowd lit. Let's say Wisconsin takes care of business against Northwestern. Looks like a shade of what they've looked like the last 2 weeks. How confident are you in their ability to hang with Penn State in camp?
I'm pretty confident because Penn State, when they came out against USC, this shocked me. USC got a 14-0, something like that, whatever it was. I'm like, they're going to kick the crap out of them. They couldn't run the ball between the tackles. It didn't make any sense. Now, Danton Lynn, the coordinator for SC, is good. He's really good. But they're not loaded up front. They're well coached and they're fast. Penn State struggled a little bit with it. Now, I'm not saying Wisconsin has the same speed as SC does. I'm not an idiot. We saw those two teams play. We know which one's got more speed on defense, but Wisconsin's ability to make the run gap fits work, etc., I think they can put Penn State into some tough spots. They got behind the chains and they had to just start throwing the ball. And the tight end had like 17. It was one of the wildest games I've ever seen.
17 receptions. Let me ask you, is that the most dominant tight end game you've ever seen? Knowing you've seen Brock Bowers, you've seen
Brock Bowers is the most unique tight end ever because he would run reverses and not run corners.
But did he ever catch 17 balls?
No, they got too many guys. Could you imagine what he would do at his school if he played at a mid-level like Big Ten or SEC? Brock Bowers? Oh my God, he'd have 90 catches by game 7.
Or at a Michigan, like at a place with a few less weapons where they throw to the tight end all the time. Yeah.
Oh, if he'd have been at Michigan last year, he'd caught 100 balls.
Yeah, it's a great point. How do you let a tight end catch 17 balls?
Some of them he caught were just acrobatic freaks. That one in the end zone was crazy.
Yep.
And you know what? They can't stop this guy. We're just going to throw. Like they changed their defense and they couldn't guard him. And again, SC in the back 7 is not lacking physical traits. He just took it away from him and they schemed it up. Kolanecki or whatever the guy's name is.
Kolanecki. Yep.
He from Kansas. He came over. He can coach. If they can run the ball, Wisconsin, that's bad news. They must make Drew Aller beat them. I know he's a future NFL player, but if they've got a two-way go, because Singleton in particular, I like Katron Allen. Singleton's on another level. Like his foot speed is crazy. I'm worried about him on wheel routes and screens as much as anything else, off play action, throwback. That's my biggest concern because him in the flat, that's no good one-on-one for anybody. He make you miss, run over you, run by you. Pure NFL player. So that's my concern. If you don't beat them up on first down in the run game, like hold them to 2.5 yards a carry, which I think they can do, and then still be able to man up some. And that part of that is that tight end. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Wisconsin can handle him in the pass. That's the new concern. Like nobody saw 17 catches coming. Like I'm not saying he's going to do that against the Badgers, but even if he has 5 and 3 of them are first down grabs, that's a problem. Wisconsin needs to be +1 or more in that Penn State game in the turnover battle. I mean, they're not as talented as Penn State. But if they do that, the run game, the pass game, the way it's been, they can at least be in a puncher's chance game like down 7 with 5 minutes to go and they have the ball in midfield. You know, that's possible. They got to stuff the run, though, because if they don't, Penn State's got a two-way go with running and passing, they're not going to beat them.
Listen, just having a puncher's chance in the fourth quarter is all drunk Ryan needs in the stands. That's all I need to be fired up and rolling with it. Okay. He is Brian Smith, bringing the insight and the truth as always at FBScout_Florida, joining us to talk recruiting and Badgers big picture from a national perspective. As always, Brian, man, we appreciate you. If you're tuning in this show, thank you so much. On Wisconsin, and we'll talk again next week.